I was gone for exactly 7 days. Not 6, not 8, 7. Just long enough for someone to think they could get away with something small, something quiet, something they figured I'd never notice. And honestly, if they'd taken a foot, maybe I would have caught it faster. But 6 inches? 6 inches is the kind of mistake people make when they think they're smarter than you. 6 inches is arrogance. See, I've owned that stretch of land just outside a little place I'll call Red Hollow for over 40 years now. Bought it young, held on to it through everything. Recessions, storms, family drama, all of it. The boundaries? Rock solid. Wooden stakes, iron pins sunk deep into the ground. Survey records filed and refiled more times than I can count. I wasn't guessing where my land ended. I knew. Now, about 10 years back, a development popped up next to me. Polished sidewalks, identical mailboxes, HOA signs posted like warning labels. They called it Cedar Ridge Estates. Real clean, real organized, real controlling. But we had an understanding, unspoken but clear. They stayed on their side. I stayed on mine. No complaints, no disputes, no late-night arguments about fences or trees leaning the wrong way. Just distance, the good kind. Or at least, that's how it used to be. I left town for a week to attend a farm equipment auction downstate. Nothing fancy, just tractors, attachments, the kind of stuff you don't rush into buying. Took my time, stayed with an old friend, didn't think twice about what was happening back home. Why would I? My land had been exactly where it was for 4 decades. Land doesn't move. Lines don't drift. People do. When I got back, it wasn't obvious at first, just a feeling. You ever walk into your own place and something feels off, but you can't quite name it? That was me, standing there, looking out toward the edge of my property where Cedar Ridge had been building a new clubhouse. Big project, lots of noise before I left, but now it was finished. And closer, way closer. I remember squinting at it, tilting my head like that was somehow gonna fix perspective, thinking maybe the sunlight was playing tricks on me. But sunlight doesn't pour concrete, and fences don't wake up one morning and decide to relocate themselves. So I did what anyone who actually knows their land would do. I went inside, pulled out my old survey documents, the originals and the copies, laid them out on the kitchen table like evidence in a courtroom. Then I grabbed my tape measure, my markers, and I walked the line. Step by step, slow, careful, checking each marker, each reference point. And that's when I saw it. The iron pin near the northeast corner, still there, exactly where it should be. The wooden stake further down, untouched. But the wall of that brand new clubhouse? It didn't line up anymore. It crossed the boundary, not by a foot, not by a dramatic chunk of land that screams lawsuit, but by exactly 6 inches. 6 inches. And I just stood there for a second, staring at it, letting that number settle in. Because 6 inches isn't an accident. You don't accidentally pour a foundation over a property line. That takes planning, or worse, it takes the assumption that no one's going to challenge you. And right then, I knew which one it was. They thought I wouldn't notice. They thought I wouldn't care. They thought, one landowner, older guy, quiet, keeps to himself. Yeah, he'll let it slide. That part, that's what got me. I didn't storm over there right away. No yelling, no dramatic confrontation. Not yet. I wanted to see how they'd handle it first. So I made a call, straight to the HOA president, a guy named, let's call him Darren Pike. Clean cut, always smiling too much, the kind of guy who says, we value community, while drafting fines behind closed doors. Voicemail. Left a message, calm, direct, gave him the benefit of the doubt. No call back. Sent an email, attached a photo, circled the encroachment, explained what I found. No reply. All right, so we're doing it that way. Next day, I drove over to the clubhouse. Middle of the afternoon, parking lot half full, a couple residents sitting outside like nothing in the world was wrong. I walked in, asked to speak with someone in charge. Took about 10 minutes before Darren finally showed up. Same smile, same polished tone. I told him what I found. Kept it simple, pointed out the 6-inch encroachment, mentioned the survey markers, the records, everything. And he just looked at me. Then he laughed. Not loud, not rude on the surface. Just that quiet, dismissive chuckle people use when they think you're being unreasonable. Sir, he said, it's barely anything. You won't even miss it. And there it was. That sentence. That exact sentence is what flipped the switch. Because it wasn't about the 6 inches anymore. It was about the assumption behind it. The idea that something is only yours if it's big enough to defend, that small violations don't count, that silence equals consent. I remember nodding, like I understood, like I was considering his point, and then I said, "I'll be in touch." And I left. No argument. No raised voice. Because the moment someone tells you something doesn't matter, that's when you make sure it does. The next morning, I didn't waste time. I called a licensed land surveyor. Then I called another one. Two independent professionals, no connection to each other, no room for bias. I wanted this airtight. They came out, ran their measurements, checked the pins, cross-referenced everything with county records. Took their time, did it right. And when the reports came back, both said the same thing. That clubhouse wall was 6 inches inside my property. Certified. Stamped. Undeniable. And that's when things started moving. Not fast, not loud, but precise. Because if they wanted to play this like it was nothing, I was about to show them exactly how much nothing can cost. Now let me pause the story for a second, because if you've never dealt with an HOA, or worse, lived next to one, this part might sound small, almost petty, like 6 inches, really? But trust me, this is exactly where things get serious. According to standard procedure, property lines are not suggestions. They're legal boundaries, and once something crosses that line, whether it's 6 inches or 6 feet, it becomes what's called an encroachment, and that opens up a whole chain reaction most people don't see coming. From a legal perspective, even a minor encroachment can create liability issues, especially when it involves permanent structures like concrete walls, because now you're dealing with zoning setbacks, fire access regulations, drainage compliance. And here's the kicker. Those rules don't care how small the violation looks. They care whether it exists. And HOAs, they operate on this weird mix of authority and assumption. They're used to enforcing rules, not being challenged by them. So when they make a move like this, it's often because they believe nobody's going to push back hard enough to matter. This is a psychological trap. They minimize the problem to control the narrative. They say it's just a few inches, so you start questioning whether it's even worth the effort, and most people, they let it go because conflict is uncomfortable and legal fights sound expensive. But here's the reality. Once you let something like that slide, you're not just giving up 6 inches, you're setting a precedent, and precedent is dangerous because it tells the other side exactly how far they can go next time. And that's the part Greg didn't think through. Because the moment he said, "You won't miss it," he wasn't ending the conversation. He was escalating it. So the next morning, I didn't call Greg, I didn't argue, I didn't send another email trying to work things out. No, I went straight to action, quiet, methodical, the kind of action that doesn't look dramatic at first, but hits like a freight train later. First thing I did was hire a licensed land surveyor. Not just some guy with a measuring tape. I'm talking certified, stamped, legally recognized, the kind of survey that holds up in court. And then, just to make sure there was zero wiggle room, I hired a second one from a completely different firm. Yeah, 2 independent surveys. Because if you're going to challenge an HOA, you don't come in halfway. You come in airtight. They spent the day out there, running their equipment, marking coordinates, verifying every boundary point, digging up the old iron pins, cross-referencing with county records, and I stayed out of their way, just watching, letting the process speak for itself. By late afternoon, both of them came to the same conclusion. No hesitate. Ion, no uncertainty. That wall was 6 inches onto my property. Exactly 6. And now I had proof, not opinion, not memory, not I think, proof. Stamped, signed, documented. So I took those reports, made copies, lots of copies. And this is where things started to shift. Because instead of going back to Greg, I went around him. I sent everything to the city building inspector, the zoning office, and the fire marshal. Yeah, I didn't just knock on one door, I knocked on all of them at once. And here's the thing about government departments. They might move slow most of the time, but when you hand them clear documentation of a code violation, especially one tied to safety regulations, they move a whole lot faster. By noon the next day, construction was halted. Just like that. No warning. No, we'll look into it. Just a stop work order slapped right onto their brand new clubhouse. And if you've never seen that happen, it's not subtle. Bright notices, official stamps, workers packing up tools midday, confusion spreading like wildfire through a project that thought it was already finished. But it didn't stop there. Because once those inspectors started digging, They didn't just see 6 inches. They saw violations. Setback requirements, broken. Emergency access clearance, compromised. Drainage flow, incorrect. That tiny little encroachment, the one Greg laughed about, had pushed their entire structure out of compliance. And suddenly, this wasn't my problem anymore. It was theirs. By day 3, the place looked like a crime scene. Yellow tape wrapped around sections of the clubhouse, signs posted, access restricted, residents standing around whispering, trying to figure out what went wrong. And that's when the phone call started. First it was polite. A lawyer representing the HOA, calm voice, measured tone, saying they'd like to resolve the situation amicably, maybe discuss some kind of compensation, find a middle ground. I listened, didn't say much. Then the offers got better. Money, real money. Enough to make most people pause. Enough to make you think, okay, maybe 6 inches isn't worth all this. But here's the thing, it was never about the 6 inches. It was about the principle. So I said no. And that's when the tone changed. Because when polite doesn't work, some people switch to pressure. Subtle at first, mentioning legal costs, time, inconvenience, hinting that fighting an HOA could get messy, expensive, drawn out. Then less subtle, implying consequences, suggesting I might regret pushing this so far. And I just kept saying the same thing. No. Short, simple, unmovable. Meanwhile, the city wasn't waiting around for anyone's negotiation. They reviewed the reports, confirmed the violations, and then they issued the ruling. 2 options. That's it. Option 1. Tear down the wall and rebuild the structure within legal boundaries. Option 2. Lose occupancy permits indefinitely. Which, if you don't speak bureaucracy, basically means that shiny new clubhouse becomes a very expensive, completely unusable building. Now imagine being one of the residents. You've been paying HOA fees, watching this project go up, probably excited for new amenities, events, maybe even bragging rights, and suddenly, it's all shut down because your board decided 6 inches didn't matter. Yeah, they were not happy. Pool access tied to the clubhouse? Closed. Community events? Cancelled. Meetings? Chaos. And guess who they blamed? Not me. At least not for long. Because once the details came out, once people realized this wasn't some random complaint but a clear, documented violation the HOA had ignored, the frustration shifted. Right on to Greg and his board. By the end of the month, the decision was made. Not publicly announced with some grand apology, not gracefully handled, just heavy machinery rolling in early one morning. Jackhammers, concrete saws, dust everywhere. And that wall, that barely anything wall, started coming down. Piece by piece. Loud, messy, impossible to ignore. I watched part of it from my property line. Not with a smile, not celebrating, just observing. Because this wasn't victory, not in the way people think. It was consequence. They rebuilt it. Of course, this time exactly where it was supposed to be, no shortcuts, no assumptions, no quiet land grabs. And from what I heard, between demolition, reconstruction, legal fees, and fines, that 6-inch mistake cost them well into the hundreds of thousands. All because someone thought I wouldn't notice. Or worse, that I wouldn't care. And now, every time I walk that line, I see it. Perfectly straight. Exactly where it's supposed to be. 6 inches that nearly rewrote the rules. Until it didn't. So yeah, that's the story of how 6 inches turned into a 6-figure problem. And if you're sitting there thinking, man, that escalated fast, you're not wrong. But it didn't escalate randomly. It escalated predictably. Almost textbook. The kind of situation you could see coming a mile away if you've ever dealt with power, property, and a little bit of ego mixed together. Because here's the thing. People love to say, pick your battles, right? Like it's some universal wisdom. And sure, sometimes it is. Sometimes walking away is the smartest move you can make. But not always. The lesson here is, knowing which battles not to pick is just as important as knowing which ones you absolutely cannot afford to lose. And property lines? That's one of those lines, literally and figuratively. From a legal perspective, ownership isn't just about what you use, it's about what you defend, and the moment you start letting encroachment slide, no matter how small, you open the door to something called adverse possession or prescriptive rights. And I'm not going to turn this into a law lecture, but the short version is this. If someone uses your land long enough without challenge, they can start to claim it. Yeah, legally. And suddenly, that it's just 6 inches becomes, it's been like that for years. And now you're not just dealing with a wall, you're dealing with a legal argument that could cost way more than fixing it early ever would have. But beyond the legal side, there's something else going on here. This is a psychological trap, and it shows up everywhere, not just with HOAs, not just with land disputes, but in everyday life. It starts small. A boundary gets pushed just a little. Then someone minimizes it. It's not a big deal. You won't even notice. It's just this once. And what they're really doing, whether they realize it or not, is testing you. Testing how much you're willing to tolerate. Testing whether your boundaries are real or just words. Because once you let one thing slide, it gets easier for the next thing to slide, and the next, and the next, until one day you look around and realize you've given up a lot more than 6 inches. And here's the uncomfortable truth. Most people don't push back. Not because they're weak, but because they're busy, they're tired, they don't want conflict, they don't want to deal with lawyers, paperwork, tension with neighbors. All of that is real. But that's exactly why situations like this happen. Because someone on the other side is counting on that. They're counting on you choosing comfort over confrontation. And sometimes they're right. Now, I'm not saying you should go to war over every little thing. That's not the takeaway here, not even close. According to standard procedure, the best move is always to start calm, document everything, give the other side a chance to correct the mistake, because sometimes it really is just that, a mistake. But when it's not, when someone looks you in the eye and tells you something that's clearly wrong doesn't matter, that's your signal. That's when you stop negotiating based on feelings and start operating based on facts. That's when you bring in professionals. That's when you document, verify, and escalate through the right channels. Not out of spite, but out of clarity. Because clarity is hard to argue with. And one more thing people don't talk about enough. Standing your ground doesn't always feel good. There's this idea that winning means you feel satisfied, vindicated, maybe even a little triumphant. But honestly, most of the time it just feels quiet. Like closing a door. Like restoring something that should have never been touched in the first place. When that wall came down, I didn't celebrate, I didn't throw a party, I didn't even tell many people about it. I just went back to walking my land, same as always. But now there's a difference. Now there's a reminder built into that straight line. A reminder that boundaries only mean something if you're willing to enforce them. And that goes way beyond land. So here's the question I'll leave you with, and I want you to actually think about it, not just answer it quickly and move on. If you were in that situation, if someone took just a little from you, something you worked for, something that was yours, and then told you it didn't matter, would you let it go? Or would you measure every single inch back? Because sometimes, the smallest line is the one that defines everything.